The rifle shot echoed through Willow Creek like thunder, startling Winifred Barnes as she clutched her tattered carpetbag tighter to her chest. It was 1876, and the Wyoming Territory was no place for a woman alone, but here she stood 22 years old, with nothing but $3 to her name, and a letter from a brother who hadn't written in years. "Settle down, folks. Just a misunderstanding at the saloon," shouted the station master, waving his arms as passengers scattered back to the platform. The train whistle blew its final warning, billowing steam across the wooden boardwalk. Winifred glanced back at the locomotive that had carried her from Boston. There was still time to climb aboard, return to the city, to the familiar walls of her aunt's home, where she'd been little more than an unpaid servant since her parents' passing. But that life was behind her now. "Excuse me, sir," she said, approaching the station master. "Could you direct me to the Lambert Ranch? My brother Walter works there." The man scratched his graying beard. "Lambert Place? That's a good 15 miles north. No stage heading that way till morning." Winifred's heart sank. The afternoon sun was already descending toward the western mountains, painting the sky in watercolor hues of pink and gold. A night alone in a strange town was not what she had planned. "The hotel across the way has rooms," the station master offered, noting her distress. "Bit pricey, but decent enough for a lady." Winifred counted the coins in her purse. A hotel would consume most of her savings. "Is there perhaps a more economical option?" The station master's expression softened with pity. "Widow Jenkins takes in boarders sometimes. Her place is just—" His directions were interrupted by shouts from the street. 3 riders thundered past, kicking up dust, with a 4th horse trailing behind them. "Lord have mercy," the station master muttered. "That's Logan Kincaid and his boys. Trouble follows that bunch like flies on sugar." Winifred watched the riders halt at the saloon. The leader, a tall man with broad shoulders and a worn leather hat, dismounted with the easy grace of someone who'd spent his life in the saddle. She couldn't see his face clearly, but something in his confident stride caught her attention. "Who is he?" she found herself asking. "Kincaid? He runs cattle up north of here. Good rancher, fair employer, from what I hear, but has a reputation for being—" The station master paused, seeming to remember he was speaking to a lady. "Well, let's just say he's particular about who he does business with." Before Winifred could inquire further, a commotion erupted from inside the saloon. The door burst open, and a man stumbled backward onto the street, followed by Logan Kincaid himself. "I won't tell you again, Dawson," Kincaid's voice carried across the street, deep and commanding. "You try to cheat my men, you answer to me." The fallen man scrambled to his feet, face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This ain't over, Kincaid." "It is for today." Kincaid turned back toward the saloon, his gaze sweeping the street and for a moment, locking with Winifred's. She quickly looked away, heat rising to her cheeks at being caught staring. When she dared look back, Kincaid had disappeared inside the establishment. "As I was saying," the station master continued, "Widow Jenkins lives 3 streets down, white house with blue shutters. Tell her Hank sent you." Winifred thanked him and gathered her belongings. As she walked through town, she couldn't help but notice how different Willow Creek was from Boston. The buildings were mostly wood rather than brick, the streets unpaved, and horses outnumbered carriages 10 to 1. Men wearing guns on their hips passed her with tipped hats, while women in practical calico dresses glanced curiously at her city attire. The widow Jenkins turned out to be a kindly woman in her 60s who offered Winifred a clean room for 50 cents a night, including breakfast. After settling in, Winifred washed the travel dust from her face and changed into her simplest dress before venturing out in search of supper. The general store was closing, but the proprietor, a round man named Mr. Peterson, was happy to sell her some bread, cheese, and an apple. As she paid, the bell above the door jingled, and she turned to see Logan Kincaid entering the shop. Up close, she could finally see him clearly. He was perhaps 30 years old, with a strong jawline shadowed by stubble, and eyes the color of whiskey caught in sunlight. A thin scar ran along his left cheekbone, and his sun-darkened skin spoke of years working outdoors. Unlike many men in town, he appeared freshly washed, though his clothes, a blue shirt, dark vest, and worn denim pants, were practical rather than fashionable. "Evening, Pete," he nodded to the shopkeeper before noticing Winifred. His eyes widened slightly in surprise at finding a strange woman in the store. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair with a slight wave to it. "Madam, Mr. Kincaid," she acknowledged, surprised by her own boldness. A flicker of confusion crossed his features. "Have we met?" "No, sir. I overheard your name at the station." She gathered her purchases, suddenly self-conscious. "You're new to Willow Creek," he stated rather than asked, studying her with interest. "Just arrived today. I'm looking for my brother, Walter Barnes. He works at the Lambert Ranch." Something shifted in Kincaid's expression. "Walter Barnes," he repeated slowly. "Tall fellow, sandy hair, about 25. Hope surged through Winifred. "Yes. Do you know him?" "Know of him?" Kincaid's tone had cooled. "Lambert's a neighbor of mine. Don't recall seeing Barnes around lately, though." The shopkeeper cleared his throat. "Barnes left Lambert's employment about 2 months back, as I recall." Winifred's heart sank. "Do you know where he went?" Both men exchanged a glance that sent worry coursing through her. "There was some talk," Mr. Peterson said carefully, "that he headed north with a mining crew, up Montana way." "Oh." The weight of this news settled heavily on her shoulders. The entire purpose of her journey suddenly seemed foolish. She'd sold everything she owned, traveled thousands of miles, all based on a letter that was clearly outdated. "You have other family here?" Kincaid asked, his voice gentler now. "No. Walter is all I have left." She straightened her shoulders, unwilling to break down in front of strangers. "I suppose I'll need to find employment until I can locate him." Mr. Peterson looked doubtful. "Not much work for a lady of your upbringing in these parts." "I'm stronger than I look," Winifred insisted, "and I'm a quick learner." "The school teacher left last month," Kincaid said thoughtfully. "Town's been looking for a replacement." "I'm not qualified to teach." "Can you read and cipher?" Kincaid interrupted. "Yes, of course." "That's more education than half the adults in this county. The children need someone, even temporarily." Mr. Peterson nodded enthusiastically. "Mayor's been desperate. You should talk to him tomorrow." The suggestion gave Winifred hope. Teaching wasn't something she'd considered, but it was certainly preferable to other options available to women in frontier towns. "Thank you for the suggestion," she said. "I'll speak with the mayor first thing." Kincaid nodded. "Pete, I need some tobacco and those nails I ordered." Taking the dismissal for what it was, Winifred bid them good evening and stepped out into the street. The sun had set, and lantern light spilled from windows into the gathering darkness. She hurried back toward the boarding house, her mind racing with possibilities. She was nearly there when rapid footsteps approached from behind. Turning quickly, hand tightening around her small reticule as if it offered some protection, she found herself facing Logan Kincaid once more. "Miss Barnes," he called, slowing his pace. "A word, if you don't mind." She stopped, wary but curious. "Yes, Mr. Kincaid?" He caught up to her, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm heading up to Lambert's place tomorrow. Business with the man. I could ask after your brother, get more details about where he might have gone." The unexpected kindness took her by surprise. "That's very generous of you." "Nothing generous about it, just neighborly." His expression remained serious. "This country isn't forgiving to those unprepared for it. Information is valuable." "I would appreciate any help," she admitted. "I'll be leaving at first light. Should be back by sundown." He hesitated. "The stagecoach office, they might have records if your brother purchased passage north." "I hadn't thought of that." "Check with them tomorrow." He settled his hat back on his head. "Good evening, Miss Barnes." "Good evening, Mr. Kincaid." She watched him walk away, puzzled by the brief interaction. He didn't strike her as the type of man who regularly offered assistance to strangers, yet here he was, doing just that. Perhaps the frontier wasn't as harsh as she'd been led to believe. The following morning, Winifred rose early and dressed in her most professional attire, a navy blue skirt and white shirtwaist with a high collar. After breakfast with Widow Jenkins, she made her way to the mayor's office. Mayor Holloway was delighted by her inquiry about the teaching position. A short, enthusiastic man with an impressive mustache, he barely let her finish explaining her situation before offering her the job on a trial basis. "The schoolhouse has been closed for weeks," he lamented. "Children running wild, forgetting everything they learned. Can you start Monday next?" "So soon?" Winifred hadn't expected such immediate employment. I suppose I could, but I should mention I have no formal training. Do you know your letters and numbers, history, geography? Yes, of course. And you're not afraid of children. Despite her nervousness, Winifred laughed. No, sir. Then you're qualified. He named a salary that, while modest, would cover her room and board with enough left to save. The schoolhouse comes with living quarters, small but private. Previous teacher left most furnishings. By noon, Winifred had secured employment, living arrangements, and visited the stagecoach office as Kincaid suggested. The clerk confirmed her fears Walter had purchased passage to Helena, Montana, nearly 2 months earlier. Did he say anything about returning? She asked. The clerk shook his head. Bought a one-way ticket. Seemed in a hurry. Dejected, Winifred spent the afternoon familiarizing herself with the town. Willow Creek was smaller than she'd initially thought, just a few hundred residents, with the main street comprising a hotel, saloon, general store, bank, sheriff's office, and a handful of other businesses. Beyond that sprawled modest homes, a church, and at the far end of town, the schoolhouse where she would soon teach. She was inspecting her new workplace, a simple one-room building with attached living quarters, when she heard horses approaching. Stepping onto the small porch, she saw Logan Kincaid riding toward town, trail dust coating his clothes, his expression grim. He reined in when he spotted her. "Miss Barnes," he called, dismounting and approaching. "I hoped I'd find you." Her heart quickened. "Did you learn something about Walter?" Kincaid removed his hat, revealing sweat-dampened hair. "May I come in?" "It's been a long ride." Winifred hesitated. Being alone with a man in what would soon be her home wasn't proper, but curiosity overrode propriety. She stepped aside. "Please." Inside, Kincaid took in the sparse classroom, with rows of benches facing a teacher's desk. "You took the position," he observed. The mayor was quite persuasive. She filled a cup with water from the bucket she'd drawn earlier and offered it to him. "What did you learn at the Lambert Ranch?" Kincaid drank deeply before answering. "Your brother left under difficult circumstances." "What does that mean?" "According to Lambert, there was money missing from the ranch safe, nearly $500. Kincaid's expression was sympathetic, but direct. "Your brother was the only one with access besides Lambert himself." Winifred felt as though she'd been struck. "That's impossible. Walter wouldn't steal." "I'm just telling you what Lambert said," Kincaid replied, setting down the cup. "He didn't press charges, but made it clear Walter wasn't welcome back. There must be some mistake." She sank onto one of the student benches. "The Walter I know is honest to a fault. People change out here, Miss Barnes. The West has ways of testing a man's character." "Did Lambert mention Montana?" The stagecoach office confirmed Walter bought passage to Helena. Kincaid nodded. He heard rumors about Walter joining a mining operation. Gold or silver, he wasn't sure. Winifred's mind raced. This wasn't the reunion she'd imagined. Walter had left under a cloud of suspicion, traveled hundreds of miles away, and hadn't bothered to send word of his changed circumstances. "I should write to him," she said, more to herself than to Kincaid. "Perhaps the mining company has an address." "You could," Kincaid agreed, "but post is unreliable in mining territories. Might be months before a letter finds him, if it ever does." "What would you suggest?" He studied her for a moment. "Stay here, teach, build a life. If Walter wants to be found, he knows where you came from." "But he doesn't know I'm here," she protested. "Word travels. If he makes inquiries in Boston, someone will direct him to you eventually." Kincaid replaced his hat. "In the meantime, you have employment, shelter, and a community that needs you." The logic was sound, but emotionally unsatisfying. Walter was her only family. The thought of being so close, yet unable to reach him, was devastating. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Kincaid," she said formally, rising to her feet. "I appreciate your directness." He nodded, recognizing her dismissal. At the door, he paused. "Town dance is Saturday night at the church. Might be a good way to meet your future students and their parents." The invitation, if it was one, caught her off guard. "I'll consider it. Good day, Miss Barnes." After he left, Winifred sat in the empty schoolhouse, surrounded by silence and dust motes dancing in the late afternoon sunlight. The enormity of her situation settled upon her, alone in a strange town, her brother gone, and a classroom full of unknown children waiting for her guidance come. Monday. She allowed herself exactly 5 minutes of quiet tears before squaring her shoulders. She had survived worse setbacks. This would not defeat her. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity. Winifred cleaned the schoolhouse from top to bottom, organized textbooks, and prepared lesson plans. Widow Jenkins helped her move her meager belongings to the teacher's quarters, a simple bedroom, small sitting room, and kitchen at the back of the schoolhouse. Mayor Holloway introduced her to several families whose children would be in her care, and the town's women welcomed her with small gifts of preserves, baked goods, and practical household items. By Saturday, she felt cautiously optimistic about her new position. The townspeople seemed genuinely pleased to have a teacher again, and several mothers had offered advice about handling the more rambunctious students. When evening came, Winifred hesitated over whether to attend the dance. She had packed one good dress, a powder blue gown, with lace trim that had belonged to her mother. It was several years out of fashion, but still presentable. After much deliberation, she decided that establishing good relations with the community outweighed her personal discomfort with social gatherings. The church was transformed when she arrived. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over benches pushed against the walls to create a dance floor. A small group of musicians played cheerful tunes on fiddles, guitar, and harmonica, while townspeople of all ages mingled, laughed, and danced. Mayor Holloway spotted her immediately. "Miss Barnes, welcome." He led her around, making introductions until her head spun with names and faces. Parents proudly presented children who would be her students, ranging from solemn 6-year-olds to gangly teenagers trying to affect disinterest. She was speaking with Mrs. Peterson, the shopkeeper's wife, when the church door opened and Logan Kincaid entered with 2 younger men. He'd traded his work clothes for a clean black shirt, vest, and trousers, though he still wore riding boots rather than dancing shoes. His hair was neatly combed, and he'd shaved the stubble from his jaw, revealing a stronger profile than she'd previously noticed. "That man cleans up nicely when he bothers to try," Mrs. Peterson remarked, following Winifred's gaze. "Shame he's so particular." "Particular?" Winifred echoed. "About companionship." The older woman lowered her voice. "Been in these parts 5 years now, built that ranch from nothing, but never courted seriously. Some say he left a sweetheart back east who broke his heart." Winifred watched as Kincaid greeted various townsmen with handshakes and easy conversation. He seemed different here, less intimidating, more approachable, though still carrying an air of authority that others naturally respected. "The younger ones with him are his foreman's sons," Mrs. Peterson continued. "Good workers from what I hear, though the taller one has an eye for cards." The music shifted to a lively reel, and couples formed sets for the dance. Winifred found herself paired with Mr. Peterson, who proved surprisingly light on his feet despite his girth. She managed to follow the steps without embarrassment, laughing when she occasionally turned the wrong way. As the evening progressed, she danced with several partners: the mayor, a rancher named Davis, and even the elderly doctor who insisted age hadn't dimmed his dancing abilities. Between dances, she enjoyed refreshments and conversation, gradually relaxing into the friendly atmosphere. She was fanning herself after a particularly energetic dance when Logan Kincaid approached. "Miss Barnes," he greeted with a slight bow, "you seem to be settling in well." "The people here have been very welcoming," she replied, noting how his eyes appeared almost golden in the lamplight. "Would you care to dance?" He gestured toward the floor where couples were forming for a waltz. She hesitated only briefly. "I would, thank you." His hand was calloused but gentle as he led her to the floor. When he placed his other hand at her waist, she felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with nervousness about the dance. "You're the talk of the town," he said, as they began moving to the music. "The new school teacher from Boston who braved the journey alone." "Hardly brave," she demurred. "Desperate might be more accurate." His eyebrows rose. "How so?" "My aunt made it clear my welcome had expired. I was faced with finding employment in Boston or accepting my brother's invitation to join him here. She hadn't meant to be so candid, but something about Kincaid made her comfortable sharing the truth. "Your aunt sounds charming," he remarked dryly. "She took me in after my parents died of influenza when I was 16, Winifred explained. "I'm grateful for that, at least." "And your brother left you behind when he came west?" "Walter is 4 years my senior. He left for opportunity, adventure. His letters painted this territory as a place where anyone could remake themselves." "That part's true enough," Kincaid conceded. "Though the remaking often comes at a price." "Like your scar?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. His fingers tightened slightly at her waist. "That's a story for another time." They danced in silence for several measures, his lead confident but undemanding. Winifred found herself surprisingly comfortable in his arms, despite the curious glances from other dancers. "Any word about your brother?" he asked eventually. "No, I've drafted a letter to be sent to Helena, but I'm not optimistic." She sighed. "I'm beginning to accept that finding him may take longer than I anticipated. The West is vast. Men can disappear into it, intentionally or otherwise. That's not reassuring. Wasn't meant to be." His direct gaze held hers. "But you should know the reality." The music ended, and they separated. Kincaid bowed slightly. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Barnes." "Mr. Kincaid," she acknowledged with a small curtsy. He hesitated, then added, "If you need assistance with anything at the schoolhouse, repairs, or the like, send word. My ranch isn't far." "That's very kind." "Practical," he corrected. "Education benefits everyone in the territory." Before she could respond, he was called away by one of his men. Winifred watched him go, puzzled by the complex man who seemed determined to help her while maintaining emotional distance. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly, though no subsequent dance partner commanded her attention quite like Kincaid had. When she returned to the schoolhouse that night, her mind kept returning to their conversation and the brief moment when his usual reserve had slipped, revealing something vulnerable beneath. Monday morning arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp air, golden sunlight, and leaves beginning to turn along the creek that gave the town its name. Winifred stood at the schoolhouse door, heart pounding as children approached in groups of 2 and 3, some eager, others reluctant, all curious about their new teacher. By 9 o'clock, 27 students ranging from 6 to 16 had filed into the building. Winifred took a deep breath, rang the small bell on her desk, and began her career as an educator. The first week passed in a blur of names, assessments, and establishing routines. Some children were far ahead of where she expected, while others struggled with basic concepts. The older boys tested her authority at every turn, particularly a 14-year-old named Timothy Davis, who seemed determined to disrupt the class. By Friday afternoon, Winifred collapsed into her chair after dismissing the students, exhausted but cautiously satisfied. Most of the children were responding well to her methods, and even Timothy had grudgingly completed his arithmetic assignment after she kept him in during lunch. She was gathering papers when a knock sounded at the door. Opening it, she found Logan Kincaid standing there, hat in hand. "Mr. Kincaid, this is unexpected." "Miss Barnes." He nodded formally. "I was in town on business and thought I'd inquire how your first week of teaching progressed." She stepped back, inviting him in. "It was challenging but rewarding. Please, come in." He entered, looking around at the now organized classroom with its maps on the walls and students' work displayed on a side table. "Quite a transformation." "The children are bright," she said, returning to her desk. "Even those who pretend disinterest." "I imagine Timothy Davis falls into that category," Kincaid remarked with a hint of amusement. Winifred raised her eyebrows. "How did you know?" "His father mentioned the boy's been unusually quiet at dinner this week. Took it as a sign you've got him thinking." "Or plotting my downfall," she replied, only half joking. Kincaid chuckled, the first genuine laugh she'd heard from him. The sound transformed his face, softening the hard lines around his mouth and crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I doubt that," he said. "Davis told me the boy actually completed his chores without argument yesterday. Called it a miracle." The compliment warmed her. "I'm merely doing my job." Which brings me to another matter. Kincaid set his hat on a student's desk. The schoolhouse roof has needed repairs since spring. With winter coming, it should be addressed before the first snow. Winifred glanced up at the ceiling. I hadn't noticed any leaks. It's the north corner, above your quarters. Mayor asked if my men could look at it while we're in town delivering cattle. That would be very helpful, thank you. Kincaid nodded. They'll come by tomorrow morning, if that's convenient. Perfectly. A slightly awkward silence fell between them. Winifred busied herself organizing papers, acutely aware of his presence. Have you heard anything about your brother? He finally asked. Nothing yet. I sent letters to several mining operations near Helena, but it's too soon for replies. I see. He retrieved his hat. Well, I should let you get back to your work. She walked him to the door. Thank you for checking on the roof situation. Just being neighborly, he said, echoing his words from their earlier encounter. As he stepped onto the porch, he turned back. There's a harvest festival next month, traditional celebration before winter sets in. You might enjoy it. Was he inviting her? His tone gave nothing away. I'm sure I will. He settled his hat on his head. Good day, Miss Barnes. Good day, Mr. Kincaid. She watched him mount his horse and ride toward town, wondering at the way her pulse quickened whenever he was near. It was foolish, she knew. A man like Logan Kincaid, independent, established, respected, would hardly take interest in a penniless schoolteacher who had arrived in town under less than ideal circumstances. The following day, Kincaid's men arrived as promised. They worked efficiently, replacing damaged shingles and sealing gaps in the roof, while Winifred prepared lesson plans at her desk. By noon, the repairs were complete, and the men declined her offer of lunch, saying they needed to rejoin Kincaid at the cattle pens. Life settled into a rhythm over the next few weeks. Weekdays were dedicated to teaching, evenings to grading and preparation, and Sundays to church and quiet reading. Winifred wrote regularly to Boston, keeping her aunt informed of her situation, and continued sending inquiries about Walter to various mining operations in Montana. October brought cooler weather and preparations for the Harvest Festival. Students crafted decorations during art lessons, and townspeople organized competitions, food contributions, and entertainment. Winifred found herself drafted onto the planning committee, mainly to organize the children's activities. The day before the festival, a letter arrived that changed everything. It was from a mining company clerk in Helena, confirming that Walter Barnes had indeed worked for them briefly, but had departed 6 weeks earlier, destination unknown. The clerk mentioned Walter had spoken of heading further west, possibly to Oregon or Washington Territory. Winifred read the letter 3 times, each reading deepening her disappointment. Walter was deliberately moving away, putting more distance between them. The realization hurt more than she cared to admit. That evening, she walked along the creek, trying to clear her mind. The water gurgled over stones, trees blazed with autumn colors, and the air carried the crisp scent of fallen leaves. It was beautiful, peaceful, and she felt utterly alone. Miss Barnes? The familiar voice startled her. Logan Kincaid sat on horseback a few yards away, having approached silently along the grassy bank. Mr. Kincaid. She quickly wiped her eyes, hoping he hadn't noticed her tears. He dismounted, leading his horse closer. Are you all right? Perfectly fine, she lied. Just enjoying the evening air. He studied her face. You've been crying. Her composure cracked. I received a letter today. Walter left Helena weeks ago. He's gone west, possibly to Oregon. Understanding crossed Kincaid's features. I'm sorry. It's silly to be upset, she said, trying to gather herself. I barely know my brother anymore. 6 years apart, just occasional letters. He's still your family, Kincaid said quietly. Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. Do you have family, Mr. Kincaid? A shadow crossed his face. Not anymore. Parents died years ago. Had a brother once. The simple had spoke volumes. I'm sorry, he shrugged. It was during the war. Billy joined the Union Army in '63, didn't come home. That must have been difficult. It was a long time ago. His eyes, however, suggested the wound remained fresh. May I walk with you? Horse could use the rest. They strolled along the creek bank. The silence between them, comfortable rather than strained. Fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet, and birds called evening songs from the trees. "Will you stay in Willow Creek?" Kincaid asked after a while. "Now that you know your brother's gone?" The question had occupied her thoughts all day. "I signed a contract to teach through spring," she replied, "and I have nowhere else to go." "The children would be disappointed if you left," he observed. "They talk about you in town. Even Timothy Davis mentioned something about a science experiment that didn't sound completely destructive." Winifred smiled despite her melancholy. "We're studying simple chemistry. I promise controlled explosions if they master the periodic table." Kincaid laughed, the sound rich and genuine. That explains his sudden interest in learning. They reached a bend in the creek where a fallen log created a natural bench. Kincaid secured his horse to a nearby sapling, and they sat, watching the water flow past. "I never properly thanked you," Winifred said, "for all your help since I arrived." "Wasn't much," he demurred. "It was everything," she corrected. "Information about Walter, the roof repairs, even suggesting I apply for the teaching position. I'd be lost without your guidance." He looked uncomfortable with the gratitude. This country's hard enough without people making it harder for each other. "Is that why you came west?" she asked. "After the war?" He gazed at the creek for a long moment. "Partly. Nothing left for me in Pennsylvania. Worked cattle drives in Texas, learned the business. Saved enough to stake a claim here 5 years back. And built a successful ranch," she noted. "Reasonable success," he amended. "Enough to employ good men, run quality stock." "You should be proud." The corner of his mouth lifted. "I am." The setting sun cast long shadows across the water, and a chill crept into the air. Winifred reluctantly stood. "I should return to town before dark." "I'll walk you back," Kincaid said, untying his horse. They returned along the creek path, conversation flowing more easily now. Kincaid told her about his ranch, the challenges of the previous winter, and his plans for expanding his herd. Winifred shared stories about her students and her adjustment to frontier life. At the edge of town, where houses began to replace open land, Kincaid stopped. "Will you attend the festival tomorrow?" "Yes. I'm helping with the children's games in the afternoon." He nodded. "Perhaps we could meet afterward, for the dancing?" The invitation was unmistakable this time. "I'd like that." "Until tomorrow, then." He tipped his hat and mounted his horse, riding back toward the creek road that would eventually lead to his ranch. Winifred watched him go, a small smile playing at her lips despite the day's disappointment. She might have lost her brother, but perhaps she was finding something else here. A community, purpose, and maybe, just maybe, someone who saw value in her presence. The Harvest Festival transformed the town square into a riot of autumn colors. Corn shocks and pumpkins decorated every corner, while tables laden with food lined one side of the open space. Children ran laughing between games and contests. Adults chatted in groups, and a platform had been erected for the musicians who would play later. Winifred spent the afternoon overseeing sack races, apple bobbing, and a spelling contest that Timothy Davis surprisingly won, beaming with pride as she presented him with a small prize. By late afternoon, her duties complete, she returned to the schoolhouse to rest and change for the evening festivities. She chose her blue dress again, pinning her hair in a simple but elegant style and adding her mother's cameo brooch, the only jewelry she owned. As she prepared to leave, a knock sounded at her door. Logan Kincaid stood on her porch, dressed more formally than she'd ever seen him, dark suit, crisp white shirt, polished boots. He held a small bouquet of late wildflowers mixed with colorful autumn leaves. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering the flowers. "Thank you." She accepted them, touched by the gesture. "These are lovely." "Found them along the creek," he admitted. "Not much grows on the ranch besides cattle feed." She invited him in while she placed the flowers in water, acutely aware of how his presence filled her small quarters. When she was ready, he offered his arm to escort her back to town. The evening air was cool but pleasant as they walked. Lanterns had been lit throughout the square, casting golden light over the festivities. The crowd had grown, with families from outlying ranches and farms joining the townspeople for the celebration. "Everyone comes to the Harvest Festival," Kincaid explained. "Last big gathering before winter keeps folks homebound." They joined a group that included the mayor and his wife, the Petersons, and several ranching families Winifred had met through her students. Conversation flowed easily, with much laughter and good-natured teasing. Winifred noticed how seamlessly Kincaid fit into these social circles, respected by the men and charmed by the women, though he never strayed far from her side. When the music began, he led her to the dance floor without hesitation. This time, his hand at her waist felt familiar. Welcome. They moved together as if they had danced 100 times before. "The children adore you," he remarked as they waltzed. "I've never seen them so excited about learning." "They're wonderful students," she replied. "Even the troublemakers have their moments. Will you stay beyond spring?" The question seemed casual, but his eyes were intent. "I haven't thought that far ahead," she admitted. "Though I'm growing fond of Willow Creek." "Just the town?" His voice had softened, her heart quickened. "The people as well? Anyone in particular?" She met his gaze. "Perhaps." The music ended, but he didn't release her immediately. "Would you walk with me? It's rather crowded here." They slipped away from the dance floor, finding a quieter spot near the church. Stars sparkled overhead, and the music continued in the background, creating a perfect autumn evening. "Miss Barnes, Winifred," Kincaid began, his usual confidence seemingly diminished. "I find myself thinking about you more often than is probably proper." She felt warmth spread through her chest. "I've had similar thoughts about you, Mr. Kincaid." "Logan," he corrected gently. "Logan," she repeated, liking how his name felt on her lips. He took her hand, his touch sending tingles up her arm. "I know you came here looking for your brother, not whatever this is becoming. But I'd like to court you properly if you're amenable." Joy bubbled through her. "I am very amenable." His smile transformed his face. "Good." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, her hand still in his, both savoring the understanding that had blossomed between them. "May I ask something personal?" she ventured. "Of course. When we first met, you didn't seem to remember my name, yet you knew who Walter was immediately." Logan looked slightly embarrassed. "I knew your name perfectly well. I just wasn't sure how to approach you. You were so different from anyone I'd met here. Refined, educated. So you pretended not to remember?" "Not my proudest moment," he admitted. "But it gave me a reason to talk to you again." Winifred laughed softly. "I think I prefer honesty." "As do I, now that I know you better." His expression grew serious. "There's something I should tell you about your brother." Her smile faded. "What is it?" "After I spoke with Lambert, I made inquiries elsewhere," Logan explained. "Walter didn't steal that money." "What?" Hope and confusion warred within her. Lambert's son was the culprit. Walter discovered it, threatened to expose him. Lambert chose to believe his son's lies, forcing Walter to leave. "How do you know this?" "Lambert's foreman told me in confidence. He respected your brother, felt the situation was handled poorly." Winifred processed this information. "So Walter left under false accusations." Logan nodded. "He had every intention of sending for you once he established himself. The foreman said he spoke of it often." "Then why hasn't he?" "Mining camps are dangerous, unstable, plans change quickly." Logan squeezed her hand gently. "But he didn't abandon you, Winifred. That much I'm certain of." Tears pricked her eyes. "Thank you for telling me this." "I should have told you sooner," he admitted, "but I wanted to be certain of the facts." "It doesn't change that he's gone," she said, "but it eases my heart to know he didn't forget me." Logan reached up, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. "If I have any say in the matter, you'll never be forgotten again." Her breath caught at the tenderness in his voice. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said softly, "that I'd like to give you a name worth keeping, if you'll have it someday." The implication was unmistakable. Though they'd only known each other a short time, something profound had developed between them, a connection that transcended conventional courtship. "That's quite presumptuous, Mr. Kincaid," she teased, heart racing. "I'm a presumptuous man," he replied with a smile, "but a patient one. I'll wait until you're ready. And if Walter returns, then I'll thank him for bringing you to Willow Creek and ask his blessing properly." Music drifted from the square, and distant laughter reminded them of the celebration continuing without them. "Shall we return to the dance?" Logan asked, offering his arm. "In a moment," Winifred replied. Standing on tiptoe, she pressed a quick, bold kiss to his cheek. Now we can go back. The surprise in his eyes gave way to something warmer, deeper. You're full of surprises, school teacher. I'm learning to be brave, she said, as they walked arm in arm toward the lights and music. This country demands it. That it does, he agreed, and rewards it too. As they rejoined the festivities, Winifred felt a sense of belonging she hadn't experienced since before her parents' deaths. She had come west searching for her brother, but had found so much more: a purpose, a community, and a man who saw her true worth. Walter might still be out there, and she wouldn't stop looking. But Willow Creek no longer felt like a temporary stop on her journey. With Logan at her side, it was beginning to feel like home.